Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast live here on Tuesday, February the 4th. I am your host, JT Ruhnke, reporter and writer here at the 440 Sports Network. You can follow me on Twitter at JT_Ruhnke. And look who is back, alive and well, back at the Sobros headquarters. It is none other than Stoney Keeley, looking like he is full health. Stoney, how are you doing? The people in the comments are saying that they are glad to see you alive and well, back from the Senior Bowl. How are you doing, my friend?
Yeah, it's pretty spotty, and as the show goes on, you'll hear like I've still got some funk going on up in my nose. I'm still on this cough medicine they gave me at the Mobile, Alabama urgent care clinic last week. Like it's been a rough go of it. And I mean, you got to know, like, as Twitter happy as I am and the constant barrage of shit posting that I do, for me not to even be able to do that for a couple of days, I was pretty down bad, running a fever, coughing, but nothing was coming up. It was a pretty rough couple of days. I'm feeling a lot better than I probably sound right now. It's just that my throat's taken such a beating over the last few days. That's what she said, that it's just this cumulative effect that makes my voice sound a little rougher than I feel it actually feels right now. But I want to say thank you to everybody that checked in on me. I kind of thought, just like shithead Titans podcaster, nobody's even going to notice that I'm gone. But I had several people that reached out to me and asked if I was okay. And I mustered the strength to reply and said, we're gonna live. I lived, bitch. Here we are.
We love to see it. And yes, of course, you are. You guys can find him on Twitter at Stoney Keeley, right? That's your handle?
It. That's me.
Yeah,
That's me.
editor-in-chief of Sobros Network, one half of Football and Other F Words, and co-writer over at Stacking the Inbox. Stoney, not just here, but also I have to, when I came back, the first thing that I did, I don't know about you, but the first thing I did was come back and get some of the food from our wonderful and amazing sponsor, ML Rose. Thank you to ML Rose once again for sponsoring the show like they do every single week, making all of this content that we bring to you free. Check out one of their 7 locations around the greater Nashville area, with a 8th one on the way in East Nashville. Thank you to Sinkers Beverages as well for sponsoring the show. Before we jump into the conversation today about, all of these off-season topics that seem to be swirling, that somehow the Titans feel like they're so entitled to be a part of this conversation. Before we get into those, reminder that you can join the conversation over on 440 Sports YouTube channel, where Eddie is already in the comments talking about potatoes. He's eating some potatoes in your honor. I don't know what that's all about.
I did a video. It's on the Sobros Network YouTube channel about potatoes.
Oh, okay. So, all right, like good potatoes, bad potatoes, like sweet potatoes.
I pride myself as a transparent, honest, authentic guy, and I had this epiphany that I had been lying to people for my entire life, telling them that I like potatoes, I love potatoes, when in fact, when it's gut check time and it's time to actually order the potatoes at the restaurant, I always get a different side. And so I caught myself being a fraud and just wanted to have a moment of accountability about it.
All right, there we go. So not the biggest potato fan then, I'm guessing here.
Not by my actions.
Okay, very well. Before we jump into some of the offseason topics, I do want to just kind of talk about, we are back home in our home bases after the Senior Bowl week. You, of course, were there for the game, and what a game it was on Saturday. Yeah. Jack Besh with the games. I remember texting in a little group chat that we had. I was like, is Seth Hennigan going to be the savior this week? Is he going to do it? And by God, he did it. But unfortunately, you were down for the count, but I think it ended up still being quite the exciting week at the Senior Bowl. Stoney, I know you were, down for the count for a lot of it, but if you had to pick one moment, what was your favorite moment of the week?
You mean moment that I can actually share on the air, of course, yes. I presume. Yeah, because that's the fun of it, man. And that's the bummer about getting sick down there, is that like everybody back home sees us on the podcast, they read the articles, that sort of thing. But Mobile, Alabama, at night during Senior Bowl week is just, it's so much fun. Like you never know who you're going to run into. You never know what's going to happen. The whole city shuts down at like 10 o'clock at night, but I mean, that's fine for an old timer like me. My days past 10 p.m. are far behind me. So for me, it was really difficult to miss out on that. But as for what happened on the field, I think for me, it was that moment hearing the audience just collectively, whoa, wow. They start buzzing, cheering. And then you look up and realize Mike Green just decleated Josh Connerly, put him on his tail end, and got to the quarterback. That was what immediately came to mind for me.
Yeah, I agree. There was some absolutely just kind of crowd pleasing moments this week, that the ones that kind of like Tavondre Sweat last year putting the center out for that plays for the Rams. I forget what his
Bo
name
Limmer.
is. Bo Limmer on his butt as well. Those moments that really kind of just absolutely wow you and kind of take a prospect to the next level. Is it also true that you watched somebody propose at the Senior Bowl this past week? Did that actually happen?
Dog, the Senior Bowl Saturday was wild. Okay, first of all,
yeah.
There were a bunch of people out there that I guess were being sworn in as United States citizens. I mean, given the landscape of our country, I thought we were about to witness like a mass deportation on the field. I'm like, this place is going to go nuts down here in Alabama. But no, they were swearing in citizens. There were mascots twerking. They had baby races. They legit just set two babies down on the field at like the 5-yard line, and the first one to crawl into the end zone was declared the winner. It was awesome, high quality entertainment. And then there was a proposal. Suddenly the cameras pan to the crowd. Somebody holds up a big sign. It just says, "Will you marry me?" Sure enough, man drops down to one knee. He's got a ring. I couldn't see it. I couldn't judge whether the guy did a good job or not, but she said yes. And I mean, I don't know about proposals at sporting events. There's got to be immense pressure to say yes in that situation, but you hope for the best. I don't know. I mean, the Senior Bowl has it all.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a wild day. Eddie saying swearing citizenship at a college all-star game, peak American right there. That's wild to me. And then Wesley saying racing babies for money, diabolical. It's kind of like the wiener races, the wiener dog races as well. Some of my favorites there. Certainly was a wild cap to a wild week for sure.
There was a lady with a robot arm there too. It was wild, man. Like every time we looked up on the monitor, the TV timeouts, there was something crazy going on, which, far be it for me to judge.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly sounds like a wild time. And then we get back, speaking of wild times, we get back from the Senior Bowl, and to begin this week on Monday, a lot of news dumping from around the NFL. And it starts with Myles Garrett, ultimately, probably the best defensive edge rusher in the league right now, requesting a trade. Cooper Kupp, the former record setter, just kind of superstar wide receiver at times, saying that he's going to get traded, amongst a whole bunch of other things. Like we just kind of got back from the Senior Bowl, and we are officially into like the off-season politics and semantics that make it such a wild ride. And going into today's show, I was like, I really, where I stand on it is I don't want to give the Myles Garrett to the Titans or Cooper Kupp to the Titans or like any of these things a lot of space. But then I realized, no, I kind of do, because I want to talk about how stupid that is.
Yeah.
At least in my opinion right now. And not to say that, you can't, you can imagine whatever you want, but I just think it's one of the most irrational, illogical, and just weird ways to think about a team that just 2 or 3 weeks ago, like was we were at rock bottom, and people are already starting to get kind of do some revisionist history and get back on the bandwagon, right? Say, oh, let's go get Myles Garrett, and we're back on Super Bowl, baby. That's where we are. But listen, I'm assuming you're on the same boat. I laugh at the ideas that the Titans would ever consider trading for Myles Garrett, and I
Yeah.
also laugh at the idea that you think you could trade the 101 and get Garrett and the 102 back. Like, I think that is laughable. I think that is nowhere near anything that the Cleveland Browns would be looking for in that trade. And then Cooper Kupp, another aging Rams wide receiver. Hey, I mean, the past couple of regimes have done that. They've gone out and traded or acquired some aging wide receivers. Maybe it's Mike Borgonzi's time to go get yet another injury-prone aging wide receiver. But no, I think it's pretty ridiculous. And it just kind of adds into this idea that I find it kind of cathartic that a lot of people online have been saying this going along with the idea that the Titans need to be in on these guys because they fit a need, and it would be good to get, Myles Garrett is as good of a player as what you're going to get at the 101, blah, 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 and so on, so when the guy who just got canned 3 weeks ago or so, Rand Carthon, played the game last year. He played this superstar trading block game, acquiring L'Jarius Sneed for a 3rd round pick. We saw how that worked out for them. We saw how that worked out for Rand Carthon. And we saw that how this regime has started to change. We look back at what Titans president of football operations, Chad Brinker, said to us in his media availability a couple of weeks ago, that when he talks about their approach to the offseason last year, they talk about how they weren't as disciplined as they could have been in some areas when talking about building the team. They said they need to be more selective, need to get the right veterans in and that are made of the right stuff. That's not a Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett is looking to go win a ring. So is Cooper Kupp. So is, and we'll get to it a little bit later, DeAndre Hopkins. These are not guys who you even think about trading for because you know where you are. I even kind of push back on the idea that L'Jarius Sneed, as good of a player that he is, and as good of a player that I think he can be at times, you really would right now with the Titan situation like to have that 3rd round pick that they gave up for him in this draft.
Sure.
And so with that, I just find it funny that people, we're not even a year removed from L'Jarius Sneed being acquired by the Titans, and we've been through this cycle, and we went through all the Rand stuff. It feels like, and I see Team Ramrod in the comments here, it feels like a lot of copium. Like it's how little people remember about the Tennessee Titans season, saying that we can just go get Myles Garrett and go get a quarterback and everything would be fixed. I find it very silly. Do you agree with that, Stoney, or am I just crazy?
No, I'm with you 100%. I didn't even really want to talk about it. I saw the update, the tweet that said Myles Garrett was looking for a trade, and I kind of thought, oh, good for Myles Garrett. Hopefully he can go somewhere where he's going to compete, because I do think he is probably the best edge rusher in the NFL. For my money, I love watching Myles Garrett. I've been a Myles Garrett sucker for quite some time. And I hope that he does go get that ring somewhere. But that's about all the thought that I put into it. Titans fans are going to do what Titans fans have always done. Anytime there's a player on the trading block, regardless of need or not, they're going to clamor for that guy. I think trading for either of these guys would kind of defy everything that Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker have spent the last several weeks telling us they want their team to be. It just doesn't make sense. And the Titans are in a position where they need to be acquiring more draft picks. They don't need to be spending draft picks on guys that you add when you're like a piece away from a championship. So it doesn't make sense to me. Now, I mean, would it be nice, wishful thinking, if the Titans could build around a Myles Garrett for years to come? Sure. Why not? I mean, who's going to say no to Myles Garrett? But it's just complete fantasy land BS that there's no way it's going to happen. There's no way it's going to happen.
Well, you say that like we didn't just witness in a different sport in the NBA, one of the wildest trades ever. Like maybe you call up, maybe Cleveland calls you up and says, we'll give you Myles Garrett for Harold Landry in a second, and you say yes, and
Yeah.
then we have the Luka Doncic trade of the
That's true.
NFL here. But yeah, I agree with you. You have
Yeah.
the only one I could really see happening, and I know this has been floated around. We know how disgruntled a guy like Garrett Wilson may be for the New York Jets. Is it plausible that the Jets could try to trade up to the number 1 pick and they swap and get Garrett? I think that's out of the realm of possibility, but also not crazy in my opinion. That's one where I think, you can discuss a little bit about that if you're trading back and getting this haul, but giving up some of these picks right now to go get a Myles Garrett or even sign a Cooper Kupp, or trade for a Cooper Kupp, it's a little ridiculous right now to me, and I think that's where it's at. And I think, in my personal opinion, to the Titans fans who listen to the Hot Read podcast, I pay it no attention until there's actual smoke. Right now, this is the people are trying to build a fire, but there's no smoke whatsoever. So, not going to subscribe to any of it, which leads us to our next topic of discussion that happened last night at Super Bowl Media Day, where a certain Titan had an interesting take on how their season has gone, and that is Mr. DeAndre Hopkins. Before we get into that, though, got to give a huge shout out to our wonderful and amazing sponsor, ML Rose Craft Beer and Burgers, with 7 wonderful locations in the greater Nashville area: Capitol View, Franklin, Gallatin, 8th Avenue, Mount Juliet, Sylvan Park, and coming soon to East Nashville in Inglewood. They have so many locations, and we love it for so many great reasons. And that's because they have simply the best beer selection and food around. Over 25 beers on tap, and their food is absolutely amazing. I know, Stoney, I tweeted out earlier this weekend that when I got back from Mobile, Alabama, the first restaurant I went to was ML Rose, and it was easy. It was a no-brainer for me because I said, "Oh wait, it's February. That means they have a new burger of the month, which is their El Jefe burger. It's a bacon burger with cream cheese and a jalapeno jam. Ooh. It was just it was the perfect blend of creamy with the cream cheese and spicy with the jam, and that bacon added the crunch. It was so nice. Unfortunately, some tough news to see that they did not go with our idea of the Borgonzi burger, which is a shame, but there's always next month that they could do it.
It's true.
Which is true, but I had that. It was excellent. Also had the loaded waffle fries there as well. Some good eats, and it was all presented by ML Rose, and we have to thank them for sponsoring the show. Stoney, let's get into DeAndre Hopkins' comments yesterday. And to me, there's been a lot of discourse online, I think, today about what he said, and maybe even himself playing a little revisionist history here, with his time in Tennessee. For me, I think it's a bad look for him, considering where he's ended up this season. And I'm not doubting what DeAndre Hopkins has done in his career. I'm not doubting or, trying to drag a guy like DeAndre Hopkins for doing what he's doing, which is, now in the Super Bowl for the first time in his career, playing for his first ring, a player who I think rightfully deserves to go out and compete for one in the last game of the season. And but the way he went about talking about his departure from Tennessee, I thought was an interesting look. And so this is from Nick Suss of the Tennessean, who is out there at the Super Bowl this week, which, I would love to be at the Super Bowl, so unfortunately it's in New Orleans, which I think is a mid city. So that's here nor there, but this is what DeAndre Hopkins had to say at his availability about his departure from the Tennessee Titans.
For the Titans and trade me to the Chiefs. I gotta thank Miss Amy and Rand and his crew for allowing this to happen, because without them, I wouldn't be in a situation. So I gotta give Nashville and Miss Amy, a lot of thanks.
How much voice did you have in that?
What's that?
I was gonna say, how much voice did you have in that trade?
I went to when we lost to the Bills, and there was a lot of stuff in the media saying that I got benched, and I'm not the type to go on social media and to speak my truth or, to speak what happens, because I feel like everything kind of always passed. But I didn't get benched. That's the first time in my career where I was like, man, I don't belong out here on this field right now. We weren't winning. No plays were being called for me. Not that I'm a player that ever needs the ball, but on the field I want to be included in something. And so I took myself out of the game, and I saw a lot of things in the media saying I got benched, and I let it go. But the next day I went to Rand office, and I was like, man, I'm almost losing love for this game, being in this situation. And I could talk to Rand like that because Rand, he understands me, and he was like, man, I see it in your eyes. I see it that this isn't a place where you might want to be. And we had that tough conversation, and the next day I got traded to the Chiefs.
So that's his comments there, and certainly I think a lot of that can be taken as fair, but I also think that, as Eddie kind of says in the comments, which reflects a lot of what I said, he kind of admitted he quit on the team because he wasn't getting enough targets, which I don't necessarily think is true. If you go back and look at the 3 games before he quit on this team, but he's cool with no targets since he's at the Super Bowl. I think it's pretty interesting considering, and I haven't seen a lot of people bring this up, that when Brian Callahan was hired and going into during kind of the honeymoon period of the Titans' new coaching regime and staff, if you remember this past offseason, DeAndre Hopkins talked about how being in Tennessee was maybe the happiest he's ever been with an organization. Those are words he said this past offseason. And to go from that to, going to Rand's office, let's see, 7 weeks after the season began, and saying he's losing love for the game, certainly seems like it's more of we just weren't winning and I don't want to do this anymore, versus this is a target issue, this is a production issue. My whole thing is like, if you're gonna go out there and say you want to chase a ring, do it. Like, we see players do that all the time, and I think if there's any player, Myles Garrett just went out there yesterday and flat out said, I want to go chase a ring. Like, there's nothing wrong with that, considering you were a veteran who has accomplished so many things in your career. But as Team Ramrod says, and I think this is something that a lot of people were trying to put on Brian Callahan, it's funny that people are using this as an indictment on Callahan, saying they were not getting him involved. I mean, go back and look at the 3 games before he ended up benching himself and quitting on the Tennessee Titans. 6 receptions on 7 targets for 73 yards and a touchdown. 2 receptions on 4 targets for 31 yards, 4 receptions on 6 targets for 54, and then quitting on the Titans. After that, I mean, you look at his major breakout game against the Tampa Bay Bucks, where he had 8 receptions on 9 targets for 86 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then also his game where, he had 4 receptions on 9 targets for 90 yards. He never went above 60 yards in any other game with the Kansas City Chiefs. And now it's to the point where I was looking back at where they are in the playoffs right now. You look back at his Houston game, 0 receptions on one target for no yards. And then against Buffalo, 2 targets, 1 reception, 11 yards. It's almost like he's actually, not getting less targets than he was with Tennessee. And so to me, it really just seems like, he was done. And I saw also people saying that, not to out anybody, but there were some Titans media saying that they were lucky to get whatever they could from him and that they would have wished they got a bigger haul. When in reality, even though he did not play the 60%, which even if DeAndre Hopkins was maybe 2 years younger, I don't even know if he would still play that 60% anyways. Like, getting a 5th for a guy who seemingly is starting to run out of gas,
washed,
feels like a really good get right now for the Titans and where they are trying to rebuild this team. All that to say, Stoney, you can share your thoughts here. And to me, it just, I don't know. It didn't sit well with me, considering that the angle a lot of Titans fans took as a anti-Callahan movement, when in reality, it was simply DeAndre Hopkins wanting to go chase a ring.
Yeah, and I like Eddie's comment here too. Not trying to be a dick, but like he kind of sounds like a guy who doesn't realize where he is in his career. That's what it sounded like to me. I mean, this whole season has kind of felt for DeAndre Hopkins like dog, he does not realize that he's starting to lose that step. Like Father Time is undefeated. He comes for us all. There ain't no shame in it, but you're not the guy that should be getting the lion's share of the targets anymore. And I remember having conversations on this show, on Football and Other F Words, with all our buddies, like how Calvin Ridley was freed up once DeAndre Hopkins was traded, because part of the issue was he was getting targets that felt were being force fed to him. We're like, oh, wow, without DeAndre Hopkins around, it's really seemed to have unlocked the potential in Calvin Ridley. So how is that the case then if you weren't having plays drawn up for you, if you just weren't getting targets? It strikes me as like total revisionist history, not wanting to kind of accept where you're at in your career. And maybe it's a struggle. You know, I'm not a world-class athlete. I don't know what guys at the end of their careers go through mentally when trying to face that sort of thing. And I sympathize with him for that, but it just doesn't seem, it doesn't seem especially honest to me. Like, just say you didn't like the losing. You didn't like the losing. You knew you were in the twilight of your career. Can I please go somewhere where I've got a shot to at least participate in this thing? And that's perfectly fine. I don't think there's going to be any judgment, but the way he phrased it, I do felt like it was poorly done. It was poorly done, and you know, kind of not the best look for him. But I will say the line goes pretty hard. I'm going to try that on my boss at the day job one day. I'm going to just go to him and be like, I don't know if I love the game as much anymore. I'm starting to lose my love of the game, and I'm gonna see what happens.
See if you can get moved to a different division or something like that. Get a promotion there because you are losing the love for your game. And so I think that ends the DeAndre Hopkins saga.
Well,
something at least with Tennessee.
The Brian Callahan stuff, it does kind of drive me nuts, because Brian Callahan wasn't the one on the field throwing him the ball. Okay. I've said it all season long. The scheme got guys open. There were times I saw DeAndre Hopkins that got open. The ball didn't go to him.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Brian Callahan ain't the one on the field throwing the football.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And so DeAndre Hopkins' tenure, much like another wide receiver playing in the Super Bowl, certainly ends with some animosity and, you know, just some words and love lost there. But, you know, all of this to say is that the title of today's episode, the Tennessee Titans simply need to block this out. I think Chad Brinker knows that. I think Mike Borgonzi knows that. As much as people want to think that the Titans can make this a yet another 1 year quick fix rebuild by bringing in some of these stud players, star talent to fill some holes. Stoney, I don't think it's a crazy thing to say that when we were talking last year about this Titans team, and we said, you know, there's so many holes that need to be filled this offseason that I don't think that they can fill them all. I think you can still say that again this year. Like, there are so many holes on this team that I still think, once again, even in this player acquisition cycle, they might need yet another player acquisition cycle to get this team to where they really want to be, which is competitive and playing good football, which I think ultimately means that whether they go get their quarterback this year in a Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders, or a late round guy and go with the bridge, or go with the bridge and take their quarterback the year after, this still feels like we are yet another year away from the year. And so the Titans would do right, in my opinion, to fade all of it out and stick to the plan, which is try out with the amount of picks you have right now to go get some more and begin draft, developing, and retaining?
Yeah, I feel like they're in a better spot this year than they were last year. I mean, I sat down at the end of last season and jotted down like who are your building block kind of players, like, for sure at the end of the 2023 season. And I arrived at Peter Skoronski, Roger McCreary, Tyjae Spears, and Josh Wiley. So like Tyjae Spears, I think we're at a point in Tyjae's career where it looks like injuries may be a concern. I think I was wrong about Wiley, but the fact that I listed 4 players from an entire football roster, and it was a left guard, slot corner, backup running back, and backup tight end, not very encouraging. But at least this year, there was an influx of young talent like J.C. Latham, Jarvis Brownlee Jr., Tavondre Sweat. They've added some pieces to this roster, some building blocks. The key to me is going to be how this coaching staff, this front office views the guys, the veterans that they have, the guys like L'Jarius Sneed returning from injury, Cheeto getting healthy, Quandre Diggs, who's a free agent, Dylan Radens is going to be a free agent, Lloyd Cushenberry coming back from an injury, Kenneth Murray coming back as well. Like, how do they view these guys, or were they truly like Rand Carthon's players? Like, did they feel they need to address the center position? Because if they do, you're right, JT, that's another hole we've got to add to right tackle, edge rusher, wide receiver, and quarterback. How do they feel about Kenneth Murray? Because that could impact, do they need another linebacker? Do they have faith in Cedric Gray and James Williams to develop into linebackers, or do they need to go get one? Amani Hooker, Quandre Diggs, do they re-sign Diggs? Do they feel like Hooker's getting a little long in the tooth? Do they add a safety? Do they put that on the shopping list? Those are the things to me that are going to impact the reconstruction of this roster moving forward. But I do, at the end of the day, still feel like they have a few more building blocks than they did last offseason.
Yeah, I definitely see that point. Maybe that should be either our next episode or one coming up here fairly soon. Just kind of making our off-season wish list of what a realistic free agency could look like for this team versus what they need to address in the draft. Could be a good
For
episode there, which we can explore. And I think that leads us, with the amount of talent and young building blocks they need, into a discussion I want to have with you. And I know we did so much Senior Bowl work last week, and the people on this podcast feed and on this channel have listened to me talk a lot about the Senior Bowl and what I saw, but they haven't had the opportunity to hear from you, Stoney, and your final thoughts after rewatching the tape, being there at the game and whatnot. So I would love to just sit down here for 20 minutes or so and talk about your thoughts from it, because, you didn't have your chance to. And I think people would really love to hear your thoughts on the Senior Bowl, and we can dive right into that, but not before we give a special shout out to our other sponsor, Sinkers Beverages, a 4-time Best of Nashville Liquor Store of the Year, serving the East Nashville community for over 40 years, and for good reason, because they simply have the best beer, wine, and spirits collection in Nashville. Got to sign up for their in-crowd for all their special allocations, benefits, and bi-weekly tastings that you can only know about when you join the in-crowd. And if you can't make it out there, don't worry, they got you. Simply search Sinkers on Uber Eats, and they deliver the booze to you. They drive so you can drink responsibly. Thank you to Sinkers for sponsoring the show. Stoney, some quick takeaways from something that, a growing sentiment, I think, over the weekend. And one I think that also is kind of silly that we can both discuss here. Jackson Dart. There's a lot of talk about him continuing to rise so far that he is now a day one prospect. Your thoughts
seen top 10.
Top 10 even. Wow.
Yeah.
And this is not just from anybody. This is from national sources saying that what they're hearing from, these GMs who possibly could still be lying about a guy's stock like that or whatnot. There's a lot of sentiment that he's rising above where I think he should be. And I think you were at the game. You got to see him play in that live action at the game. Your thoughts on Jackson Dart's week, how he did in the game, and where you think he is now after a Senior Bowl week of practice.
Yeah, I don't think he did anything in the practices that really warranted all of this hype. And I've talked about this before, but there's a disconnect sometime between the media who are down there talking to agents and other media people instead of sitting there and actually watching what's happening on the field. And it felt like that was another case of this. Jackson Dart's agent doesn't sleep, apparently. He's out there grinding. I mean, we all deserve somebody in our corner the way Jackson Dart's agent is in his corner, because it's just absurd. But even like with the tape, like the tape does not line up with a first round quarterback. All right. The draft nuts have been grinding Jackson Dart tape for a year now, and the buzz has never been this is first round tape. And I still think that is the most important thing in NFL circles. Do you have the good tape? I think he probably did help his stock a little bit at the Senior Bowl because it wasn't an outright disaster. But I will say the coaches tend to ride the hot hands in the game. And Jackson Dart did not start for his team. He came in relief. And when the team was down a score with 2 minutes and 32 seconds left on the clock to go win the game, the American team turned to Seth Hennigan to helm the ship and move the length of the field to score the game-winning touchdown. I know it's just an all-star game. It's an exhibition. People are going to say, Stoney, don't put too much stock into it. But I'm telling you, the way that the coaches coach those games, guys still earn those spots. And Jackson Dart was passed by Seth Hennigan with the game on the line. I think there is plenty to like about Jackson Dart. I don't want this to turn into a let's bash Jackson Dart, let's, kill the kid with hammers kind of situation like the ET meme. That ain't it here. I think there are some traits you can work with, but I think he's a day 3 kind of guy. He's got day 3 caliber tape with potential backup upside, and who knows what you could develop him into. So to me, like the hype around him was just completely overblown. I don't hate Jackson Dart as a prospect, but you're taking crazy pills if you're talking about him as a top 10 pick.
Would you say in your quarterback rankings right now, where would he fall? Is he quarterback 4 for you?
I've currently got him 5, and that
5?
is behind Sanders, Ward, Howard, and McCord.
Kyle McCord. Okay.
Yeah.
I think we were doing a show last week and we were talking about all these SEC quarterbacks, and I started to get into Braden Gall's conversation of having Jackson Dart 3, fully just forgetting that there were other quarterbacks out there. And I was like, wait, Will Howard's out here. He's definitely not. I think I'm there with you, but I think you do bring up an interesting point here, which is what we talked about last week, in that it feels like this is yet another year of having some, Senior Bowl quarterback talent kind of try to rise their draft stock as much as possible this week. And yet come April, when the draft finally arrives, we probably see a lot of these names not go until the third day in round 4 or 5. If there were any quarterbacks, you talk about a Kyle McCord or a Will Howard, could you see those two go on day 3? Like, is that a possibility, or is there such a gap right now to you that it feels like it would be Sanders and Ward in round 1, probably in any order, and then a QB-less day 2, and that's where you start to see the quarterbacks go in day 3?
I feel like Howard and McCord are both going to be day 2 guys. Now, I don't know. That's not to say they're going to be, top of the second round, but I do think the experience, the production this season, I think just from a plain old, as best as I can put it, a plain old playing quarterback perspective, those 2 guys look like they could at least hold their own in an NFL offense. And so I think that will be valuable to teams that need a quarterback and are looking at the rest of the quarterbacks behind this group. I think Dart is probably the only other guy that could work himself into that conversation, but you're going to have to really see something special in the guy, in my opinion, because McCord and Howard both look like safer prospects.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. If you had to give, not to put you on the spot, let's go with two players that were your MVPs. One on the offensive side of the ball, one on the defensive side of the ball. After rewatching the tape, seeing them play in the game, two guys who were by far the best in practice and throughout the week. Who are those two guys for you?
On defense, it would be Mike Green. I know he only practiced the first 2 days and then dipped out of Mobile, but you like I said on Football and Other F Words over the weekend, like you earn the right to do that. You don't, unless you're hurt, you don't get to do that unless you've been so dominant those first 2 days that you have just answered every question that the scouts, the coaches, the front office personnel people that they have about you. You've answered all of those questions. You get to go home. I think he was every bit as advertised. It was awesome to see him put on some weight, get up to 251. He looked stocky. He looked rock solid, and it didn't affect his twitch or his bend at all. He was still out there hitting moves on guys. He was a menace. He was impossible to stop at some point. So I think he was clearly the guy on defense. On offense, I'm going to say, man, I feel like the answer, most people would probably say Grace Abel, the interior offensive lineman out of North Dakota State. But I do think guys started to figure him out a little bit on day 3. And he didn't really pop as much in the game as I thought he would. So I think I'm going to be different here. And I think I might actually go with Anthony Belton out of NC State, because I think he was a guy that going into this had questions about foot speed. Could he mirror edge rushers? Could he play on the edge? And I think he and Ariante Ursary were the two most consistent tackles, whether it was on the left side or the right side, all week long. And Belton showed up in the game. I think he answered every question you had about him. I'm a big fan of Belton. I said before, I think he's closer to OT1 in this class than a day 3 prospect. If the Titans were to want to draft him and flip him to the right side, I would have no qualms with that whatsoever, even if it means they've got to spend the 35th pick to do it.
Wow. Yeah, I agree with you. I believe right now on PFF's big board, he is prospect 119. And Eddie says here, Belton there in the 3rd or 4th. I wrote up a mock draft on Stacking the Inbox, talking just Senior Bowl players, and I had both of those guys that you just discussed. I had Mike Green as my 101, and of course I would not take Mike Green with the 101, but I used the 101 in this scenario as the best prospect in Mobile this week was
Senior Bowl only.
Yeah, Mike Green. He was by far the best guy, and then. Yeah, Anthony Belton. I think there's a, if, like you said, I think he ends up finding his way into day 2. Does he go all the way up to 35? I am wary about that. Maybe I can start to drink the Kool-Aid a little bit more, but he's one of those guys that I think if Bill Callahan could flip JC Latham to the left from the right, I could see them buying into this idea that, Anthony Belton can be that guy that can flip from the left to right. He certainly played all over the line last week. He played at left tackle, some guard, and then also at right tackle, and was one of those guys who looked when moving between the different kind of spots, looked the most consistent on a rep to rep basis. And so I think that definitely was one of the best offensive line prospects there. I do think it's a little spicy take saying he's closer to OT1 than the day 3, but I kind of agree with you.
I've seen people say like, oh, he's a 6th-round pick, and I'm like, you're smoking crack. You're smoking crack. That's crazy. I mean, watch the tape. He's got some of the best tape of the tackle class. I rank him right now in terms of who I think is actually going to play tackle in the NFL. And I go Josh Connerly, Josh Simmons, Ariante Ursery, and then I probably got Anthony Belton right there at 4.
Yeah,
That's
I think I'm with you.
I don't think Will Campbell's going to play tackle. I don't think Kelvin Banks is going to play tackle. I'm not sure about Donovan Jackson. I mean, he kind of had to step out and play tackle late down the stretch for Ohio State, and now all of a sudden everybody's like, whoa, wait a second. We've been saying this guy's a guard, but he kind of looks like he might have some tackle tape. So I don't know there. I kind of tend to think he's still going to be a guard. I'm not as high on Cam Williams as everybody else. Like, that's why I say, like, man, Belton's closer to the best group than he is a day 3 prospect. I mean, day 3 for this tackle class is you're taking like developmental guys that are dice rolls.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of those dice rolls, there were 2 that I think both of us had our eyes on this week. Jackson Slater out of, I believe, Jacksonville State. Am I correct? Sacramento State. And then Clay Webb out of another
Jacksonville State.
Oh, okay, there it is. Okay, I mixed the 2 up there. Jackson Slater from Sacramento State and Clay Webb from Jacksonville State. Those are 2 guys who I think, if the Titans were to kind of go with the thinking in the line of thought that Bill Callahan, we should get as many guys in this building for him to work with. Those are 2 guys I think you could find on late day 3 that are worth the dice roll. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Jackson Slater, really coiled up guard, like, to be as portly and stout as he is, like, could really like explode out of his stance. Really good wide feet, good lateral fluid movement ability, good hands, poised, ready to strike, that sort of thing. Webb's just kind of this ass kicker, like, just it doesn't wear gloves. First of all, that's the first thing you got to know about Clay Webb. Doesn't wear gloves, just gets out there, grabs, punches, stands dude up. There's a rep where, we talked about how big Deion Walker was and looked last week. There's a rep where Clay Webb, that he springs out of his stance and just puts those hands right inside and just stands Deion Walker straight up, keeps the feet moving to kind of recalibrate on the fly. And Deion Walker just gets stonewalled. And I'm like, who is this dude from Jacksonville State that's just standing up Deion Walker like that? But it was awesome. He was an ass kicker all week.
Yeah, I love to see it. Before we get out of here today, let's look at some of the comments that you guys have in here. Eddie saying, bro, can I hire Dart's agent to handle my next contract negotiation? He's trying to get a promotion. I agree with that there. Richard saying, the season ended a month ago and Dart is rising. Sounds like draft season BS to me.
Yep.
I certainly agree. It is lying season after all. We can talk about the Brian Callahan, Shadur Sanders to Joe Burrow comps, which I think, there is some truth to that, but also, is that lying? I don't know. I don't know if I buy that. Strike saying the only Dart I want is in a bar.
I'll drink to that.
I will drink to that as well on maybe the Hot Read Happy Hour on Friday as well. Shrike saying as well, did we ever figure out if Brew McCoy was hurt? He was a guy who I think had a kind of good first day of practice, and then we just didn't see him the rest of the week. I don't know if you heard anything about that, but I certainly did not either.
I didn't, and I tell you, like, the things that I saw on tape for Brew McCoy were like just this big-bodied wide receiver that has a really sudden cut on an in-breaking route, and he was doing that first day at practice, and I kept like nudging, like, Zach keeps making fun of me for he's like, you're not going to get me to come around on this Brew McCoy agenda, which fair enough. I mean, I'm not trying to get anybody to come around on it, but I'm just like, that's the thing he does on tape that I'm like, if he can find an NFL team that's willing to do that with him, like, that's all he's got to do, and he'll find a role in the NFL. And then he wasn't there for practice on the next day, and I haven't been able to find out why just yet. So
me neither. So that's an interesting one to keep tabs on, I would say, as we
Yeah.
enter the combine season here. Shrike also talking about Belton, saying, is there any concern for you about his age at all? A little bit on the
Sure.
older side, for sure, playing, I believe, all 4 seasons or 5, if you count redshirting. Any when it comes to offensive linemen, does that matter to you as much as maybe some other positions?
I would not say it matters as much. I mean, it matters some, and I think it matters. Like he's missed some time due to significant injuries in his past before. He also spit on a guy in the middle of a game, and there were some people that, I mean, you watch his tape and it's, the echo of the whistle, and he's still got his hands around some dude's throat trying to choke the life out of him. And you're walking back to the huddle and you just see Anthony Belton shove a guy to the ground after the play's over. Like there are some concerns with Belton, but I just think his tape is so good, and I think he held his own against better competition in Mobile. You take a flyer on that sort of. I think there's an element of proven to his game. He's a proven. He's got the size. He's got the technique. If he continues to get better with his feet and can take on speed, a little more consistency, I think you put up with some of that stuff, assuming you vet him, right? Like that's a key piece in all this too, is like, I'm assuming the Titans are not going to pick him if they get into his past and they're like, yeah, this dude's like murdered 18 people. I don't think he's got the best character.
Pull a Tremaine Burton, like the Bengals last year.
Yeah, exactly. I'm assuming they're going to vet him and figure those things out. And if he clears, I would be okay with the pick there.
Yeah. Z-Dean saying, would you take Belton over Membo right now?
I forgot about Mimbu, so that's a good call out there, Zedine. Mimbo is OT3 for me, so I go Connerly, Simmons, Mimbu, and then I would have Ursery and Belton right now.
Gotcha, perfect. And then I guess we can end the show here on Eddie's comment. Well, we'll end the show on Eddie's comment, and then I'll ask you one question on our way out here. Eddie's saying Easton hinted on Twitter we're going to be discussing a different group of round 1 prospects for Titans. Is that insider trade, or is that being worked on? To Easton, I would say the only thing you need to worry about with Easton right now is what he's doing with a pair of khaki pants at a Target. That's all I would really.
We can't.
That's all I'm gonna say. And if you want more information on that, I implore you to go over to the A to Z Sports channel when he's on and ask him about his pants being returned to Target in that chat. That sounds like a good idea, and I'm glad that is out in the world. Let's get that trending, just like we did #Easton can't ride a bike. Final question here, Stoney. Are you, if he's there at the 2.35, are you pulling the trigger on Jack Besh?
Yeah, sure. Why not? I love him. I mean,
he kind of feels like he would fit into the Callahan system too. Like,
I
am
wrote
I
about
wrong
him
for saying that?
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, Jack Besh can do like everything. Like you watch his tape and he's much more of a polished wide receiver than I think he's given credit for. Really neat, nifty speed variance, route running. I like his excuse me, I'm still fighting it.
You're good.
Rocked up frame, like he's jacked. He plays really hard. I drew some parallels to Puka Nacua. I saw somebody else compare him to Puka over the weekend, and I was like, oh yeah, like plays really hard, really competitive, kind of like wants to drag you down into a knife fight in the mud sort of deal and just outwork you. Has some speed to his game, and then goes out and makes the Senior Bowl one of the most memorable football games I've ever covered. This exhibition college all-star game ends up being one of the best games that I've covered. I have no problem with adding him to the offense. And kind of like what I said about Anthony Belton, if it takes the 35th overall pick to get him because you don't have a third, you're not going to be picking again until day 3. He's probably not going to be there. Pull the trigger.
Yeah, I agree with you there. As Shrike saying, Stoney's definitely drafting him in the Hot Read fantasy draft. That's for sure. Would be interesting to see. I mean, did you win your league this year with having Bo Nix as your quarterback?
No, but I made the playoffs. I made the
Oh,
playoffs,
okay. There
and
you
I
go.
lost. I lost by 1 point because I missed that Jalen Waddle was injured, and I
Wow.
started Jalen Waddle, and he got 0 points that week.
Damn. That is tough for sure. Thoughts
It
and
would have
prayers to
it
him.
would have been a three-peat, and I kept ignoring trade requests for quarterbacks. Everybody's like, "This dude has no quarterbacks," and I'm like, "No, no, no. I'm not gonna give up draft capital. I'm gonna draft my quarterback."
And that
And when it
means this year you
when
got to draft Jack Besh then, correct?
Yeah, yeah. So I drafted Bo Nix and started Bo Nix from week 1 for the entire season, and I made the playoffs.
I love it. Well, that's going to do it for the Hot Read podcast today. Thank you all for joining, and thank you to our wonderful and amazing sponsors, ML Rose. Once again, 7 wonderful locations around the greater Nashville area in Capitol View, Franklin, Gallatin, 8th Avenue, Mount Juliet, Sylvan Park, and coming soon to another location to East Nashville. Got to get out there and check out their new burger of the month, the El Jefe burger. It's so dang good. Thank you to Sinkers Beverages as well for sponsoring the show. And until Friday, Stoney, when we talk about maybe we do our free agency wish list. Maybe we talk a little
Ooh.
Super Bowl, the big game coming up this weekend, and then next week. I don't want to give away too much because it may not be next week. It may be the week after, but there's a week coming up where it's finally time on the Hot Read podcast. We will be doing deep dives into the Shadur Sanders versus Cam Ward debate with some special guests. Going to be a lot of fun on that, and we'll finally get an answer out of me in where I stand. Finally, I'll stop fading the noise. I will step into the limelight and talk about that. All that and more coming up this draft season. Can't wait to bring you guys all the amazing content like we did in the Senior Bowl and more, especially when the Combine shows up at the end of this month. But until Friday, this has been the Hot Read podcast. We will talk to you then.